told me about what he was doing at Storage, right, when it was still kind of in the formation stage. It is, and he told me that it was going to take down AWS. And when you come to someone at Overstock and you say, we're going to beat Amazon, you've got birds of a feather right there. And he's probably doing a better job than we did on the retail side, but that's where we are. Clint and Silicon Slopes, thank you for growing Tech Summit to what it is. This is fantastic. And thank you for recognizing that we need a blockchain track. I don't think there's anything that's more exciting in tech than what's going on in the blockchain world. And so what I wanted to do today was start by giving you an introduction how Overstock, a company that sells sheets and toasters, got into blockchain through what's now its wholly owned subsidiary, Medici Ventures. So I'll walk through that. Then I've had many, many people say, what is blockchain? And so I'll give a little bit of an explanation there. I'm not going to go too into the weeds there, but hopefully I'll get enough so that you can go, oh, that sounds cool. I need to know more. And then I want to talk about two investments that Medici has made that we think are real solutions to solving global poverty that both involve the blockchain in different ways. So that's where we're going. 2003, I'm the president of Overstock.com, and my then high school son, who's sitting right here in the middle, is lounging on our living room couch like only high school boys know how to do. And he said, Dad, when is Overstock going to start accepting Bitcoin? And non-OG that I said, I don't even know what that sentence means. What's Bitcoin? And so Porter, who was a senior in high school, explained to me what Bitcoin was. I started researching it. Some others on our executive team had been researching it. And then in December of 2013, in one of our executive meetings, someone said, hey, what about we take Bitcoin on Overstock? And everyone had kind of been thinking about it, and we said, of course we should. We're in the business of making it easier for people to buy stuff from us. So we take credit cards. That's why we take PayPal. That's why we take any payment method we do. Let's do Bitcoin. And so our CEO at the time, and our current CEO, Patrick Byrne, mentioned to a reporter kind of offhandedly, we're going to start taking Bitcoin sometime in the second half of 2014. And that got out in the press, and boy, there was a furor over it. As those who are crypto enthusiasts and cypherpunks know, once you get a company that's $1 billion talking about taking Bitcoin, everyone was like clamoring for it. And we had 2 or 3 developer teams come to us and said, why are we going to wait till the second half of next year? Let's do it right now. And in that week between Christmas and New Year's of 2013, they locked themselves in a war room. We slid pizzas under the door. And on January 9th, 2014, so 4 years ago this month, we started accepting Bitcoin as a form of payment. We became the first $1 billion company to start taking Bitcoin, and it was awesome. Today, we accept over 50 different cryptocurrencies on our site. And I will tell you, for the first several years that we were accepting cryptocurrency, the average weekly sales revenue from crypto was about $30,000 a week. Now, it's better than $250,000 a week in crypto revenue for people buying sheets and toasters and the kind of things we sell. So it is becoming more mainstream. It's good to see you here, Chad, up on the front row, making me happy. Anyway, that was our introduction to cryptocurrency. Then we started looking at it and figuring out that the underlying technology below Bitcoin and other things, blockchain, is so much bigger than just cryptocurrency. And blockchain is more than Bitcoin. Bitcoin is to blockchain, I would say, as email is to the internet. Now, I'm older than a lot of people in this room. My first experience with email was when I was a freshman in college, and I got an email from my mother on CompuServe. And I thought that was the internet. And at that time, it was. Email was the first killer app on the internet. Bitcoin is really the first killer app on blockchain. And we started looking at what blockchain could do and said, there are a lot of applications that can be built that will really change the world. So let me give my kind of simple explanation of what blockchain is. Today, when you and I transact, and we don't know each other, or maybe we know each other, but whenever we transact, there are always a bunch of trust brokers, trust institutions in between you and me. That might be the government who's printing money. When I give you a green and white piece of paper and you say, oh, it's $20, it's good, it's because we've relied on the government as a trust institution. If I want to Venmo you money for buying me lunch, I have to have a bank account, you have to have a bank account, trust institutions in between us. If we're buying stock or selling stock, there's brokers and prime brokers and clearing corporations. There's trust institutions between us. And these have built up over time so that people that don't know each other can interact with each other and not get ripped off. The problem with trust institutions is they're rent-seeking. They charge money, they take time, they present risk for fraud. Sometimes they're there for purposeful fraud. And so the system is set up that assets don't transfer well. With the internet, we got it so that information transferred almost freely and frictionlessly. But assets didn't transfer that way. The blockchain will do for asset transfer what the internet did for information transfer. Because when I give you a Bitcoin or a $20 bill, you don't want a copy of it. You want the real thing. And the blockchain allows for this decentralized, distributed set of ledgers to say, when I say, I'm passing a $20 bill to you, it's off my ledger and on your ledger, and all the ledgers that are out on the blockchain get updated instantaneously. And then every so often, for example, on the Bitcoin blockchain, every 10 minutes, those ledgers get stamped as the new truth. And that block of ledgers gets chained to the previous block, which was changed to the previous block, thus the blockchain. And so assets can be transferred. We can know that when we send something digitally, it can now be recognized as transferred. So the blockchain takes out the middlemen and gives us trust through technology. A lot of people call blockchain technology trustless technology. I don't like that term, because I think what you've done is you've replaced trust intermediaries with trust technology. And there's more trust there because you're not relying on banks to not make a mistake or brokers not to defraud you or whatever it is. So that's the future, and that's what blockchain is. And so Overstock said we can see a lot of areas where that's going to disrupt, where we can take middlemen out of different industries. And so we've set up a company called Medici Adventures that our goal is to change the world, which sounds audacious, ostentatious, but we think we can do it. Just like the internet changed the world, we think blockchain will change the world by advancing blockchain technology that does three things. The first is to democratize capital. If you're here trying to raise money today, you got to find a venture capital firm. And who invests in venture capital firms? It's big family offices, it's pension funds. It's a unique class that gets to invest in those things. We think the blockchain makes crowdfunding more viable. We think it makes all kinds of money raising better. And we think it's, and I'll talk about this in a minute, we think it gives more people access to digital currency, which democratizes capital. We think it eliminates middlemen. In my mind, middlemen are an unnecessary scourge that add time, cost, and risk of fraud. And we think it rehumanizes commerce. That's kind of a grand statement, but blockchain technology, when you and I have an electronic handshake to do a deal, it's as if we were kids again, and we spit in our hand and we shake on it, and we're good for our word. It can rehumanize capital that way. So those are the kind of companies Those are the kind of efforts that we hope that our companies are involved in. And so we've focused on 6 different industries. And some days saying we focused on 6 means we're not focused on any, because 6 is way too many. These are enormous industries. But I think blockchain technology is going to transform supply chain and the medical industry, all things. We're focused on capital markets, money and banking, voting, identity, property, land, and underlying technology. And you might say, why is voting in that? In my mind, voting is an asset that when you transfer, you're not transferring a copy of your vote, you're transferring your actual vote. And that's something that blockchain can help us on. And I just want to give a quick example. For those that are from Utah, this past summer, we had a special election to replace a congressman who resigned. In Utah, we vote by mail. Let's just kind of walk through the process of what vote by mail is and what trust institutions are involved. First, a county clerk has to look at the rolls and say, who's a registered Republican and can vote in the closed Republican primary? They send a ballot out. So you have a trust institution of the county clerk. Well, this summer, the county clerk in 2 of the largest counties that were in that election sent out Republican ballots to Republicans and unaffiliated voters. Trust institution failed. Then they send it by U.S. Postal Service. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say trust institution fail. U.S. Postal Service, okay? Then it shows up at my house, if I'm one of the lucky ones to get it. I fill it out, I put it in my confidentiality sleeve, I lick the envelope, I sign the envelope. If I haven't signed it with the exact same name that I signed my voter registration with, my vote doesn't count. Did I use my middle initial when I signed up? Did I put that suffix at the end of my name? Did I get married and change my name? A lot of people had trust institution fail, they didn't know about it. Put it back in the mailbox, you hope it gets there, the county clerk opens it up. The confidentiality sleeve was see-through. Trust institution fail, right? Then they put it through a Scantron machine, you hope it works right. You don't know. Never once when I've voted have I ever known for sure that my vote was counted as cast. Blockchain technology can do that. We could have an app. Sign in with your biometrics with a thumb or an iris print. Goes in and your vote is put in there. It's shaken up so when the county clerk gets it, it's anonymous. But you can check to see that the person you voted for was how your vote was cast. It's an asset. These are the kind of things we're thinking about. So we've got 12 companies that we've invested in. Some are here today. T0 is kind of forefront in the news. They're sitting right over here in the middle of this section, involved in a big ICO. They are going to disrupt the capital markets, taking on Wall Street. Why think small, right? That's exciting. But I want to talk about 2 areas where I think blockchain solutions can fight global poverty. The first is banking the unbanked. And the second is unleashing dead capital. So let me talk about the first. Gabriel Abed, founder of one of the companies we've invested in down in Barbados, said something I think is really true. He says, it's expensive to be poor. It's expensive to be poor. The banking laws since 2009 have made it much more difficult for banks to stay in business and for many people to even get a bank account. Since 2009, 25% of global correspondent banks, so that might be the Barbados branch of the Royal Bank of Canada, those have been shut down, meaning people in those countries have less banking opportunities. And the cost of being unbanked is really high. Here's just some statistics. In the Caribbean, 40% of the population is unbanked. In South America, it's about 70%. In Africa, it's upwards of 90%. In the United States, it's about 8%. If you don't have a bank account, how do you participate in today's global economy? It's hard. How do you buy things online? How do you pay your utility bill? And the reason people in these countries are unbanked isn't because they don't have a job. No, they've got a job. It isn't because they don't have an address or a utility bill or a birth certificate or all the other things you need to open a bank account. They have all those. We've just said it's easier not to bank you for risk of credit or risk of terrorism or risk of fraud. We're not going to give you a bank. And so these people that are unbanked don't get to participate in our society. Think about what you primarily use a bank for. I primarily use a bank for two things. One, to store my money. To store my money. So when Medici Ventures gives me a paycheck, it's not going to the till and peeling out a bunch of dollar bills and I'm hurrying home to put them in my sock drawer to make sure they're in some secret place that no one can find it. Put it in a bank because it's safe. The second reason I use a bank primarily is for access to digital currency. If you're banked, that means a credit card or a debit card. So if you're like me and are going on a date on Saturday to Costco to do your grocery shopping, you don't have to bring a gangster wad of cash to pay at the register. I've got digital currency, I've got a debit card. Well, that's what we can do with digital wallets on the blockchain. You can digitize fiat currency. I'm letting my politics show when I say fiat currency. That means currency issued by a government with really nothing backing it other than the government issuing it. Or you can have you can have a cryptocurrency. And so here's what BIT is doing in Barbados. BIT is creating a digital wallet so that those that aren't banked can have access to a digital wallet to store money and to spend it digitally. They're working with central banks in Barbados, in the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, and other central banks to get these countries to begin to issue a portion of their fiat currency digitally. It can be on a wallet, you don't have to be banked. Now you can go to the convenience store and buy food, or the grocery store, or the gas station, or a utility bill. You can pay it that way. It creates a nearly frictionless payment system that includes remittances. We'll talk just a minute about the remittance market. I go back to Washington, D.C. a fair amount, and when I'm back there, I frequently take a cab. And every time I'm in the cab, I always ask the driver, where are you from? And most often, they say, I'm from Ethiopia. A lot of Ethiopian cab drivers in Washington, D.C. And then I'll say, how frequently do you go back to Ethiopia? Oh, once in a while, once every 10 years, once every 5 years, not so often. How often do you talk to your family in Ethiopia? Oh, I talk to them, once a quarter, once a month. I say, how often do you send money back to your family? All the time. And I say, how do you do it? Almost invariably, the answer is Western Union. You get unbanked on one or both sides of this transaction. Western Union charges about 15% per transaction. Talk about it's expensive to be poor. It's expensive not to have a bank account. Global remittances is what BIT and some of our other companies are doing, are going to make it less expensive to be poor and have people involved in the 21st century economy. Financial inclusion, banking the unbanked. This is one of the ways we can fight global poverty on a big way. We've got another company down in South America where 70% of the population is unbanked. And in Argentina, our 30-something-year-old CEO of that company, a fellow named Sebastian, in his lifetime, has seen the government fiat currency of Argentina go to zero 3 times. What do you do in an inflationary economy when you get paid and you're afraid the currency will go to zero? You go buy bread today. Because that loaf of bread that costs you $1 a day is going to cost you $2 or $5 or $10 tomorrow or next week. What they're doing is they're taking fiat currency, people are storing it on their digital wallet in cryptocurrency, and then if the fiat currency goes to zero, the cryptocurrency has stored their value better than a going to zero currency in these countries. So a lot of ways to bank the unbanked, help the poor do better with blockchain technology. We move to item 2, unleashing dead capital. So Hernando de Soto is a world-famous Peruvian economist who spends a lot of time thinking about property and land registry. And he said, capitalism's greatest triumph is, in the eyes of 4/5 of humanity, an hour of crisis. We do well in the Western world. 2.5 billion people participate in the global economy. 5 billion don't. And why don't they? It's largely because they don't have property rights in their country. And the blockchain can help address that problem. So these 5 billion people that aren't participating in the global economy, they own assets. They own land, they own all kinds of property, but their record of that land is not in government registries. It's in local registries. So if you look at these pictures here, this one on the upper